our panel. First, we have Ian and Jeff Ford. I'm going to introduce you all together, if that's okay. Ian and Jeff are both adjuncts with the Grantham University Business School, and they're also the Chief Executive Officers, is that okay to say Dash Enterprises, which is a web-based multimedia firm. Next, we have Roben, I'm going to let you say your last name.
Graziadei.
Graziadei. I totally would have messed that up, so I'm glad I let you do that. Roben is with us because she is the founder and owner of Net Results. And she's also with McGraw Hill, but Roben has a wealth of knowledge when it comes to higher education and entrepreneurship. Next, we have Jason Grill, who is a business owner and a radio show host, the founder of Entrepreneurship Radio here in Kansas City on KMBC. And Margareta Smith Knopik, and she comes with us from IACBE, which stands for the International Assembly of Business Collegiate Educators. She actually just got in town, what, yesterday? Last night from traveling internationally. So hopefully we'll keep her awake since she has the time change. And Edward, I'm going to let you say your last name. I'm sorry? Bernicke. Comes from us from UEP Kaufman Foundation. He's a financial and operations management executive. So without further, we're going to have them speak to us. And our moderator tonight is Chase Cookson, and he's a full-time faculty member with the Mark Skousen School of Business. So.
Hello. Hello. Hey. One response. Someone's awake. So, because the topic tonight is entrepreneurship, globalization, and its relationship to higher education, I wanted to share just real quickly a story that provides kind of a foundation for the discussion that we're going to have. I've got a good friend who's an entrepreneur. He calls me one night, it's right before his product launch. He says, I'm getting ready to flip the switch, midnight. This consumer electronic that he had designed and developed, he's ready to go. He thinks I'll probably sell 10 or 20 of these things here over the next week. Flips the switch at midnight, wakes up in the morning, he gives me a call at 8, he's frantic. He says, Chase, I have a problem. I said, okay, what's going on? Calm down, there's something with the website, what's going on? And he says, no, 300 orders came in last night, I have $60,000 in my account. And I'm thinking, this is the kind of problem that I would like to have. So, but he did have a problem. He underestimated the demand for his product. He didn't have the capacity to build that product quickly enough to deliver in the time that he had guaranteed. And so I was forced to ask myself the question, if this was an individual who had academic training in business, or possibly just some simple business sense, would he have made those same mistakes? So, with that in mind, since he is an entrepreneur and a small business owner, I pose the first question to the panel, which is, do entrepreneurs and small businesses hold the keys to global economic recovery? I'll jump in at once.
I'll jump in. Because some of the companies I work with, we also work internationally. We work a lot with Italy and France. In importing of food items, one of the companies that I work with there. And the company that I work for would be considered a small to medium business. And they are run by a family-owned business and an entrepreneur. And I think, yes, I think it does hold the key. The challenge is getting a mindset, or I think getting a mindset to go outside of your local area. You know, when you first start up, you look at, am I going to sell to Kansas City? Am I going to sell to the state of Missouri, state of Kansas? But your competition is no longer just based in the America domestic. Your competition is coming in from all over. And in doing your research and looking at that, yes, I believe that a small business owner can impact in their own way a global market, but it's the combination of the whole that makes it big. You know, can my product or what I do change the world? No, but I can change something.
Very well said.
Jeez. My take on this is a little bit more broad. Small business development is certainly one manifestation of entrepreneurship. But entrepreneurship is actually bigger than that. It's a filter for looking at life, and individuals who are truly entrepreneurial. And seriously, there are only about 7% of the population who are truly entrepreneurial, so they're an incredibly valuable asset. And people who are entrepreneurial are those folks who see opportunity where others don't. And so, while starting new businesses is something that we all recognize as entrepreneurial, what about all of those folks who work in every one of our organizations, who see different things and have these bizarre, off-the-wall ideas, and you don't know how to manage them? And if you don't know how to manage them, you can't retain them. And if you can't retain them, you cannot benefit from their ideas. So I think if we step back and take a bigger look at this, then absolutely entrepreneurs can change the world, because they're the ones that see that stuff out there that the rest of us are really slow to recognize. And the worst thing a manager can do is hold them back or try to make them conform, because they'll go. Anyway, so that's all I have to say about that.
That's good.
And I will say too, that I do a lot with, I just got back from South by Southwest, and I work with a lot of companies in Kansas City through my own business and through our radio show that we host. And today we had Kevin McGinnis, who's the Vice President of Product Development at Sprint, and a lot of, in Kansas City at least, a lot of the big 6 companies are allowing managers or people that work at their companies to go work for the startups in Kansas City while at Sprint still, or while at their company, because they find that the satisfaction rate of the employee goes up. So you're going to see that happening more and more in Kansas City, I believe, and with bigger companies in our area. So that'll help foster that entrepreneurship as well.
So there was a couple things mentioned there that I want to follow up on, and I'm going to pose this question specifically to anyone that's worked within higher education. When you speak to that, that visionary mindset, Margareta and Jeff, when you spoke to, this idea of the small business being able to play a role, what does that mean for today's business students and for how we teach them?
Do you want to go first, or?
No.
Okay. It might seem kind of counterintuitive that an accreditor, such as IACBE, could really help encourage entrepreneurship, because in a lot of people's heads, accreditors are really that confining force that try to make everybody the same. However, we work with business programs all over the world, and the management programs really are doing business students a disservice if they are not including an opportunity for management students to learn about recognizing, first of all, recognizing entrepreneurial people, learning how to understand them and manage them, how to encourage innovation. And I think we, in higher education, need to relearn how to, I hate to say teach creativity, but maybe encourage creativity and innovation, because our school system, from high school all the way through higher ed, almost discourages that, I think. So I love what Sprint does.
Yes.
Yeah, because that almost makes, you know, if you can give students or employees permission to be creative and to push the envelope and to make mistakes, because it's the mistakes from which you learn, that's awesome.
And it's a risk, because what if they go to the startup, but they're betting on the opportunity that people won't leave. So, biggest thing experience.
Well, yes, but if they do leave, so.
I guess you're out.
Well, I just want to add another layer to this conversation. A couple of thoughts are going through my mind. One of them is, are you all familiar with Tom Peters, who wrote the book In Search of Excellence? You know, Tom Peters was working for McKinsey Corporation, had some fantastic ideas about consulting models and branding models and pursuit of excellence, and they not only didn't like that he was sharing his ideas, but they fired him because of it. And he broke out on his own, and now he's a billionaire. Also began teaching at Stanford, and had Google. The founders of Google were students in his classroom, and he taught them exactly what you're talking about. So the layer I want to add to this conversation is the distinction between managing creativity or managing people and students and leading them. I think leading is inspiring people to think outside the box and inspiring people to take a risk and rewarding them. Tom Peters calls it failing forward, rewarding them when they fail so that people are not afraid to take a risk. And then the other layer I want to add to this is from Stephen Covey, who also was knocked down again and again and again and again and again and again, and then became, you know, globally recognized for the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People and their time management tools. Both of those leaders that established an entirely new brand and industry were people who were fired and knocked down and knocked out because they were thinking outside of the box. So I think we have to really rethink being comfortable with people thinking outside of the box and not being afraid of it, not being intimidated by it, and fostering that.
I know in the business classes at Grantham and other places, I had a philosophy. I wasn't what I would call a cradle educator. I came into teaching higher ed later on after having worked in the business field for a while, bringing that experience with you. But my philosophy is that, you know, basically 4 things. There are no bad questions. There are only 2 types of questions you can ask. There are good questions and great questions. Good questions are questions that I can answer, and great questions are questions I can. There are good ideas and great ideas. The good ideas are ones that have probably already been thought of in one shape or another, and the great ideas are the ones that you have just totally blown the lid off the box. Can you take that great idea and make it into something? The best thing you can do in higher ed then is to give that student something of your own self. What have you experienced? Maybe you play devil's advocate with them in a discussion forum, and you say, hey, you know, you have a great idea, but have you thought about this? What happens if somebody comes in and yanks the carpet right out from under you? Are you tough enough to take it? Or are you going to run back and hide? Or are you going to go, that wasn't a great idea anyway? So being able to invest yourself into a student as a higher educator with your experience, and not just from the book, you know. I mean, books are good guidelines. You have to cover a course objective. You talk about accreditation and stuff. You have to cover certain accreditation. You have to cover objectives. You have to do those things to make sure you don't get off the beaten path, okay, with it. But within that, there's a lot of room and latitude that I think an instructor can take advantage of and actually share with himself.
You know, I wanted to add also to a couple of things that y'all said about we don't foster creativity, we don't foster being counterintuitive or following our instincts, and it's not really even once we're in grade school or high school or higher education, it's even from as a child. So I think to answer your question, Chase, is a great opportunity for instructors to recondition a student's mind to say, you may have been taught that it's not okay to be creative or think outside of the box or think for yourself, but in this classroom we want you to think for yourself. We want to hear the most wild and crazy and audacious thoughts. And so really I think instructors have an opportunity to really foster and lead that culture in a classroom.
I agree with that 100%. I don't think that entrepreneurs are very innovative people, but they're also doers. I mean, they're innovative people that aren't doers. They come up with all kinds of ideas, but they never go anywhere with them. There are people who are doers, but they're not innovative. But entrepreneurs are innovative doers. I don't think that, I'm not in higher education, but I don't think that that entrepreneurship should be relegated to the business school. Every class, every subject, I don't care if you're in Russian history or math or English, there's innovators in there, and there's doers in there, and there's people that they're in those areas, the Russian history, whatever, because they have a passion for Russian history. And they're the ones that then, when they learn Russian history, then they can be innovative with Russian history. How do I make money with Russian history, or how do I move Russian history forward? What do I do with Russian history? Now I'm passionate about it. I know about what I do with it, and I think universities could do well by adding a week or two of entrepreneurship training to every course.
For the faculty.
It
starts at the top.
And every course that they teach.
That's
I agree.
A great segue. I actually want to start with you on this this question, because there was a study released by the Kauffman Foundation in 2009. It was titled "The Anatomy of an Entrepreneur," and they found that over 95% of the respondents actually had a bachelor's degree, and 47% had an advanced degree or a terminal degree. And so with those statistics in mind, what you just mentioned about higher education and not just the fact that it's business itself, what is it about higher education that you think, or do you think, increases the likelihood of the folks that you work with being successful when they go out there and start their own businesses?
Yeah, that's a real interesting question, and I think there is a connection. Most of them are educated, and for one thing, to figure out what you can do, or to see what can be done differently, be done better, you have to have some basis and some background. So you have to, if you never went to school, you didn't learn about your Russian history or whatever, you can't be innovative about Russian history. So you need that background for one thing. And education gives you that. They also you need to learn discipline. I mean, an entrepreneur, I don't care how wild-eyed they are, they need to be disciplined. And if they're not, they need to be trained to be disciplined. But where sometimes I think maybe higher education falls down is that an entrepreneur things don't stay static in this world. They did 100 years ago, but they don't now. So what I learned in school way back when I was in school, or being with somebody when you learned in school, when you were in school, a lot of it is not relevant. It's changed. I mean, and you need to continually educate yourself and continually push forward, and so that's why I think the entrepreneur training needs to be kind of a constant thing and a real-time thing, not something that you learn in a classroom 10 years.
That's great. I want to ask actually Eden and Jeff, how has your own education played into your ability to be successful in the organization that you started?
I think for me, with my type A personality, I'm sitting over here and I'm listening to innovation and open on the box and think outside the box, which is excellent. And those things do need to be brought back into the classroom. But by the same time, again, back on the type A personality, they need to know what a business plan is. We talk about those things in our classes at Grantham, and any good entrepreneurship class needs to address this is a business plan, because that's great if you've got all the experience in the world thinking outside the box. But you have two options. One, you can either learn it well, not fail at writing that business plan or finding your financial funding, or you're smart enough to surround yourself with people who can do it for you, that you trust, that you know will deliver. And I guess what I get excited about is when I'm in the classroom and somebody tells me, you know, I've got this mechanics certification, I'm at Grantham doing this business program because I want to learn the nuts and bolts. I want to run this company. I want to know that the bottom line at the end of the day stops with me. And while I love the innovation, you have to have that, and I agree for that 7%. The other 93% have to be able to support that 7% by knowing what you do every day. So personally, I've got a background in economics and a paralegal certificate and a management degree. I'm almost done with my doctorate. And for me, that education really allows me to have the creativity to think outside the box, to establish for us kind of a multifaceted company where if I can sit down and lay out a business plan to my husband and say, hey, what do you think of this? He understands it, we've been kind of down the same road, and he can encourage me, and you know, let's be honest, he's the creative side of things in this half of the whole. And I can really get down to brass tacks because he's had that same foundation, that same experience. And as cheesy as it sounds, I love it about Grantham because we are providing that to our students every day. And when they get it in the classroom and you see it in black and white, it's not nearly as good as seeing their faces, but when they get it, you feel like you've done something very, very worthwhile that day.
So what I'm hearing, and this, it sounds like a consistent theme here, is that the entrepreneurial movement itself isn't in any way negating the need for some type of education. It may not be, you know, as Ed said, it may not be, you know, traditional business training, but is that what I'm hearing? Is that, does anyone disagree with that?
I think entrepreneurs are really curious people. I think they're curious. They are willing to do what it takes to learn what they need to do. And what's so great about higher education, especially here in the United States right now, is that it is available to anybody, anytime, any form, any price. And if you want the information, you can find it. And it doesn't have to be in a structured higher ed environment.
That's right. I'll say it real quickly, in Kansas City especially, as resources go with entrepreneurship, we are like in the top 5, maybe the top 2 or 3 in the whole country in some parts of the world. You know, Global Entrepreneurship Week took place there last year. I mean, the Kaufman Foundation is just one of the pieces of the puzzle, but I work with startups and talk to startups that are just starting in Kansas City, and there's so much momentum, and there's so many different resources here, which is huge, that aren't, you know, technically higher education, but resources for some of the universities provide, but also programs and 1 million cups at the Kaufman Foundation. There's so many different places for people to go to network, to talk, to learn about their ideas, to find VCs, to find you know, people that can help them in all these different areas. I mean, KC SourceLink is one good example. I mean, there's just so many places for people to go that aren't technically, you know, universities or whatnot in Kansas City.
But I do want to speak to the comments that you made about Grantham University and higher education. I have my degree from proprietary school, not Grantham, because I was living in California. So sorry. It's National University. And what was great about the Grantham model, which is similar to the model I had, is I was taking classes from people who had experience in their field. So not when I started my own business, which I ran my own business for 15 years, I've only been an employee of McGraw Hill for 4 months. So I ran my own business for 15 years, and we were in the black every year, profitable. And one of the things that gave me the confidence to do that was that I did know how to write a business plan. I knew how to write a marketing plan. I knew how to sell. I learned about leadership. I learned about myself, the ways that I needed to develop and grow. And what I love about the higher education business model with Grantham University is students are learning from people that are in the field. And that's applicable knowledge that you can take and turn right back around when you go to start a business. And that really gave me a lot of confidence when I started my business.
So, and Jason, you kind of spoke to that, and not specific to, you know, to Grantham, but just in general, some of the resources that are out there. Do you have other examples of?
Kansas City's just has so many. It's unbelievable. I mean, there's no reason why we can't. I wrote an article for the Huffington Post about Kansas City becoming the most entrepreneurial city, and we're getting exposure now. Like I said, I was in Austin, Texas last week for interactive sessions of South by Southwest, and we're not referred to as flyover country as much on a local level. And I think that's one, because of the spark that Google Fiber provided, but two, because, you know, for instance, the Kansas City Startup Village, there's all these different things happening. It's a great ecosystem that's building here.
And Kaufman really kind of set the trend, got us out there, got the name out there.
Oh, right, and it's well respected. You know, you go to Washington, D.C., you go to New York, they've heard of it, they're very supportive. But I want to mention too, like, technology is one of the things that I think is needed with education. Well, you know, for instance, in high schools, a lot of high schools, public high schools and private, there is no developer kind of technology kind of education on .NET or any kind of tools. And there's obviously we all know there's a big technology developer coding deficit in this country, and a lot of this stuff is outsourced. And I think that a lot of these companies need that. I mean, when they're starting up, and that's one of the things I don't think is taught enough in our schools, in high school, to get people started, and they can look towards it in college. I think that's really important. And they don't. And I think that it's a lot cheaper nowadays to educate on technology with the cloud than it was 10, 15 years ago. And I think that that's something we need to step up our game in if we're going to be competitive.
Thank you. One thing that I'm a stereotype entrepreneurs, but most of them I find are innovation focused. So that's where kind of the rub of education comes from.
Sure.
They're the ones sitting there, what is this doing for me, type of thing. I know and you know, I'll probably have the same experience. In undergraduate school, you know, that was okay. When I went to graduate school, I got my MBA at night school, and everybody I was there with was already working. We already had real problems that we were talking about, and it just meant so much more to you than sitting back here in undergraduate, you know, getting a grade out of this course. I mean, people just got into it. And that's the way entrepreneurs are. I mean, we work with entrepreneurs, and they need a business plan. But the first thing, particularly when a guy, you know, he may lose his house next month if he doesn't, you know, make the revenue stream next after, to start talking to him about, okay, let's put a business plan together. You know, they gloss over, and where you really need to get to them then is why is this important to you? And a lot of the things that we do, and we do say, okay, we're not going to let you lose your house. Let's take care of that, and then we'll get you the business plan. But they have to do it, and it takes them a little while sometimes. But once they see the value of it, and so you put a business plan together, you put a marketing plan together, an implementation plan as to how to do that, and then they do that, and they benefit a lot from just doing it, but then using that, and now they see the value of it. So now they go forward with that and with their business, and they take it forward. But to start with, they're sitting there, that's one of those classes I didn't need to take, you know. But so they are impatient. So that's something the education system needs to take into account. Don't bore them, you lose them.
Well, I think on that note, an excellent course offering in higher education is the basics of how to start a business. Because I don't think that people really think about what's involved in starting a business. One of the things that one of y'all probably know the statistics on failures of small businesses. I don't know the statistic, but I know it's high. And I think one of the reasons it's high is what I've seen from some of my colleagues who have failed in starting a business is they don't manage their growth. They bite on the bullet and try to do it all at once. They spend a lot of money to build a fancy website and marketing and logo, and they don't start small and then let themselves grow and manage their growth. So I think there's a real opportunity for course offerings and just the basics of real world, what does it take to start and build a successful business.
That's good. So I kind of want to use impatience as a segue to talk about globalization, because I think one of the reasons why entrepreneurs so frequently are impatient is because there's somebody out there probably with a similar idea. So one of the questions that I have for the entire panel is, how do you see globalization impacting entrepreneurship as a whole? Very narrow question.
I think it affects it a lot. I think that, you know, for instance, there's a group called Pipeline Innovators, and guy had a download, you know, how many downloads can you get for your app? You know, that a lot of people think that's what makes them successful, right? And they don't really know how to do that. But let's say they know how to do that, they have their business plan and all that. They get 23 million downloads in a global marketplace over a month span, and next thing you know, they have a TV show on the Disney Channel. I mean, I think it affects a lot of entrepreneurs. I mean, you have an ability to take off a lot faster, especially with technology and globalization, and the ability to go across the ocean. And I think it's a lot different than it was 50 years ago. I think the technology aspect alone gives people an opportunity to grow and expand quicker.
I think the other thing that one needs to consider with regard to globalization is when I started a business in the San Francisco Bay Area, I was assessing my market in the San Francisco Bay Area. And then my business began to grow beyond the San Francisco Bay Area across the country. So then I needed to do a market assessment of what would sell within my product line across the country. So now, with business being a global environment and global economic endeavor, I think one needs to really think about, when I develop a product or a service or a concept or a marketing plan, will it have universal sellability and applicability? Does that make sense?
It does. And so, Jeff, for instance, using the context of that discussion, how do you weave those ideas into a class that you're teaching?
It's having had some experience in learning in China, Germany, two totally different cultures, two totally different economic structures, okay? And, not just the political things, but actually the economic engines that run those. What can you tell the student from a higher education standpoint, and how do they do their research into that? I mean, you do have culture. You do have something that sells here. Even something that would sell to a group of people here from a certain region of the world is not going to sell in that region of the world, potentially. Okay? And educating them, you know, we go back to on the education side, is that how do they conduct their research? I mean, how do you conduct your research on a global arena? If you've never been to China, if you've never been to Europe, if you've never been to these places, how do you familiarize yourself with it? We have the ability to do that today, sitting in, right here, where we can go out and do effective research and encouraging them to do it. The key to it is, though, is knowing what is the real research and being able to filter. You know, you see the commercials all the time now. The one I think of is the insurance one, where the guy's doing it, and the girl comes up and says, "Hey, you know, I saw that, and I didn't think it was true." I said, "Where'd you hear that?" "Well, I heard it on the internet." You know, they don't lie on the internet. You know? One of the things that education does teach you is what is a valid source. You know, somebody might be selling you water as a really high-end mineral product. You know, but that's the thing, is the market research you're doing, weaving that into your classroom, is this really valid? Where'd you get this from? An accredited source? A newspaper is not necessarily an accredited source. It may have truth in it, but is it an accredited source that you can use to build your decisions on?
I almost hesitate to ask because this is a risky question, but would you agree with Jeff on that? Or,
9 times out of 10 I will. Well, actually, a lot of what I am seeing is because of globalization, kind of to play the devil's advocate, you're not marketing specifically to a region anymore. You're not marketing to, a specific country, a specific state. You're marketing to a specific demographic. If you are a mom and you are working from home and you have 3 children under 10, and you go online and you open up an Etsy store, you're not marketing, no offense to the gentleman on the panel, to males who are 35 and up. You're marketing to a mom that wants patterns for her child so she can make a quilt. So you're not necessarily so concerned with the geography as you are, a mom in China is going to want to make a quilt just as much as a mom in LA. If that's their thing and that's who you're marketing to, it's more of a demographic and trying to figure out what that demographic wants and who you're catering to rather than the region.
I And that's what I meant by universal applicability, is really thinking
Who your customer is, not just where they live.
Okay.
I think that, and that I'm looking at this from the perspective of our members who are higher ed, okay, and especially the American universities, colleges and universities. I think we have a couple of, I think our students have a couple of disadvantages that a lot of times we don't even think about. Technology is fabulous, and it gives us the impression that once we go online, it's available to everybody. But I don't think American students really have an appreciation, number one, of the differences in culture and how things are perceived differently in different places, and outside of the United States especially. Plus, we also assume that the laws are the same everywhere. And, you know, if I had a really unique product or a really very cool idea, but, you know, I mean, that's some proprietary knowledge. There are some places in the world I don't think I want to sell because it could be, you know, it could be stolen. The idea could be taken, and I'm not prepared to deal with that yet. So, but I'm not sure that we do a really good job in higher ed right now, kind of giving our students the opportunity to see that.
And so are there countries or universities outside the United States where you see that being done well, or that we could take cues
No,
from?
not necessarily. I think they are also kind of stuck in their own little cultural vacuum too. You know, just visiting with the European schools, and I've just been doing that the last 10 days. You know, European business schools are very different from American business schools. They have no concept of general education, for example. You know, our higher ed kind of depends on a foundation of general ed, and they don't. Theirs is business. And so when I talk about the need for Russian history, and they're going, what? So it's a different approach. It's just a different mindset. Not right or wrong, it's just different. And so
One thing too I want to mention that's kind of the other side of the coin is that you see a lot of entrepreneurs and startups creating things in Kansas City or in this region that aren't going to sell. You know, they think they're out in Silicon Valley. So I always tell those folks to look for innovation and look for ideas that will help in their marketplace. For instance, look at the big companies here, Starters of the world, Garment. You know, if you can create some sort of an idea or a technology that will help in one of those companies' areas, you have a lot better success to get funding and to succeed where you are, instead of trying to create an idea, or you have an idea for an app or whatever that isn't going to get any downloads in the Midwest. If you can try to use your education and work to find that idea that's going to help one of those industries that's big in your area, your geographic area, it's going to be way more successful.
And that's where education can really help. Like you all said, learning how to do that market research, learning how to identify the characteristics of your market. I have to laugh at your example, and this happened to me twice. Clearly I am a slow learner. That very example did happen to me twice, in terms of, you know, having too much business is almost worse than not having enough. So I still think making mistakes is your best teacher. That and your bank account. Yeah.
So there's two different kind of sides to this that I'm hearing. There are industries where we want to really focus locally, or where we can be successful in our geographic area, and then there are industries that are by their nature global. What are some of the industries that those of us that work in higher education should be preparing our students for success in? Some of those global industries.
You know that, well, I mean, clearly they're the big ones. I think they're, you know, I think energy is a big one right now. I think anything sustainable is, you know, I don't know how to answer that because, you know, it won't be long before the, you know, the different countries are going to have a high need for manufacturing again and for people who can do woodworking and plumbing, and because students aren't going into those fields anymore. And
there's a lot of opportunity in this area for manufacturing entrepreneurs.
Huge.
People forget about that.
Huge.
A lot of opportunity.
Right, I think I want to take a different angle on answering that question is, instead of thinking about what industry to prepare students for, asking students to really figure out what is it they absolutely would love to do.
Yes, yes.
Because one won't be successful in a small business if they don't love what they're doing. It's too hard, and all the risk is on your shoulders. If you all know this, you're small business owners, if you don't sell it, you don't eat. So it's different from being employed. And therefore, during those tough cycles, I was going to say monthly cycles, but that those tough cycles which we all go through in a small business, if you don't love what you do, you might give it up. So I think higher education would do well to serve students by, I don't know, this is offering a class on helping them figure out what do they really love, what are they really passionate about, and then think about starting a business doing that.
And it has to get you through those days when you have only one customer and the garbage needs to be dumped and the employee bathroom needs to be cleaned. Who's doing that? Well, you are. And that sometimes isn't thought about when you're developing your idea.
Absolutely. So, and you work with a number of startup organizations. Do you have examples that you can maybe provide where there's a mismatch between, you know, what the entrepreneur thought that the market would want and went that route when that wasn't something where they really had their heart?
Yes, and you know, a lot of times, I was mentioning to somebody earlier, we work with a lot of startups or folks who maybe haven't started up yet, but they're thinking about starting up. And we also work with the small business growers in business. But some of the best success stories are probably the ones that go to a workshop or two and sit down and talk with their mentor and say, God, this isn't for me. Because they have now, entrepreneurship isn't for everybody. I mean, and it's too much work, or the idea that they have, they're not passionate about. They're not, and the only way you're going to put in the type of work to really make this thing successful, I think I agree. You have to have a passion for it. And I do think that's the first place to start, is the passion. And in finding that, from that passion that you have, the innovative doer then takes that passion and figures out a way to change the world with it. Instead of, I can make a lot of money making this gadget here, but I really hate making this gadget. That isn't going to work.
Okay, great. And I actually want to pose this question this will be the only one that I pose to every single member of the panel, I promise. But if you could give one piece of advice to a business student on small business ownership, especially in this time of global economic recovery, what would it be? Just one suggestion.
Mine is figure out what your passion is and pursue it passionately.
This is something I struggle with a lot, working smarter, not harder. I have a lot of balls in the air with a bunch of different companies and different types of things. I'm a lawyer by trade, which I don't think I mentioned to that. But you just gotta, you can't just keep hustling all the time. You gotta kind of focus on one thing, and I think that helps too. So working smarter would be my advice.
Technology is powerful in our market today. Learn it. Learn your social medias. Learn social networking tools. They are inexpensive and can reach thousands of people.
I think it would be, get started. Don't just sit around thinking about it, just do something.
I think find your passion and be focused. have a goal, visualize your goal, be focused, and then put plans in place to get to your goal.
I would say find the people who are successful that you admire and ask them how they got there.
So we have some themes here. Passion is one of them. Impatience and get started is another, definitely. And then when we've talked about higher education, we've talked quite a bit about that it's not just higher education, but there are alternative forms as well. And that although there are a number of successful small business owners that are highly educated, it's not always, the academic environment that's going to provide that. So I think that's good. Are there other themes that you all would like to identify that you've heard that possibly have not just expressed? No?
I think we can't define success by, sometimes I do a lot of media stuff. You hear a lot of certain companies, but because they get funding from, like Zarly got $14 million of funding, and then suddenly they're a successful entrepreneur. Like, I don't consider that a success. I mean, it's not always about the landmark or about getting funding. It's about how, what are you doing to better the society? Are you making money? I mean, you got to remember those things. It's not always about the person that gets a $1 million investment for their company. I think sometimes we overvalue that too much in entrepreneurship, who's getting VC money, because I don't think that really defines success in a company.
All right. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and open it up for Q&A then. Any members of the audience have a question? We have one already.
I just had a couple of comments. I'm dying here because I'm in higher ed too. And what we all provide in higher ed or in maybe less formal types of education to entrepreneurs are tools, the toolbox. And whatever you can add to your toolbox is going to help make you successful. And you never know when somebody's going to decide to be an entrepreneur or actually take that launch and ramp up. But I used to teach at Donnelly College, entrepreneurship, and none of the people actually that I taught actually started a business that I knew of. But they had the tools. They knew what it was like to develop a feasibility study and a business plan and how to do the research. And there's certain rules of the game. When you're talking about globalization, there are rules out there. And you can't just go to China and buy a company or acquire or license or however you want to get started in a global marketplace. You've got to learn the rules. So higher ed education, maybe higher ed can learn a lesson about entrepreneurship from entrepreneurs because there are some entrepreneurial higher ed opportunities as well. But I feel a little defensive sometimes when people say, oh, entrepreneurs don't need to get a college degree. It's like, nah, the rules are there, the tools are there, and if somebody defies that, they may be missing something. So I agree with you and thank you. I'm honored to be here, so thank you for your insights.
So, although that was a comment, are there any responses from the panel?
Completely agree on that.
Yeah.
Well, I just finished my master's degree in marketing, and we had case studies, and some people say, oh, well, they're just case studies. But they were real case studies. Coca-Cola, and companies that stumbled. And Coca-Cola globalized, but they didn't localize. And they had to learn through failure on how to localize something that just didn't work in certain parts of the world. And I loved those case studies. Do you guys include?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh!
But the faculty member has to, I believe, really understand how to facilitate that conversation and that learning process. And just because your students didn't start a company that you know of, they took those attitudes and that knowledge into other companies.
Oh.
So you probably don't even have any idea what kind of impact they have had.
Well, as you said earlier, the lessons that you learn when you are becoming an entrepreneur or thinking about an entrepreneur can follow you throughout your life. So it's not, it's a mindset.
It becomes a way of life.
Yeah.
Right?
I think I think that the case studies are awesome. It was one of my favorite classes that I ever participated in was business law. And that entire class for 16 weeks, we did nothing but case studies. I learned one thing out of that class. This applies in 49 of the 50 states, not Louisiana.
That's true.
We coach people in Louisiana, I think that's right.
I'm Pamela Corrado. I'm from Bellevue University in Bellevue, Nebraska. I'm not from Louisiana. And thank you so much, Grantham, for inviting Bellevue University down this evening. The one thing that strikes me as an educator with the panel as well is the 93%, 7%. And so the majority of the students that we're working with, the 93% that are going to manage innovation, hopefully, and foster innovation. The one thing that I so much see in the classroom, whether it be virtual or grounded, is the idea that I am going to work, my goal is I am going to work for someone, not I'm going to work with someone, whether it be a group of people, whether it be an organization. So it's very much, how do you shift, or what techniques are there to shift that mindset of, I think, a majority of both returning adult learners that this is this reality that I'm trying to create, and I'm not merely looking for the job, developing a toolbox, and I appreciate developing a toolbox, but a fundamental shift in the way of thinking about employment, which has so radically changed. For me, kind of this passive, I'm going to learn, here are the skills and competencies I need to build, and how to deliver it. Do you folks have any reactions, recommendations, suggestions?
As a former faculty member, we struggled with this all of the time because, again, a lot of it I think is part of the American culture. We are so competitive and we're so individual, which should translate to very entrepreneurial stuff, but it works against teaming and really being a part of a group and being able to see a big project through that you couldn't do by yourself. I don't know. We tried group projects, and yes, they were successful, and we tried, forcing students to make decisions quickly so that, hoping they would make mistakes and be able to analyze them. But I don't know.
I think it's a lot to where you are. I think if you grow up here, your goal is to, you're looked upon after college if you get a job at a big company, it's a success. But if you go out to Silicon Valley, if you start your company after college or whatever, it's the cool thing to do. It's not go work at a big company. So I think that's kind of changing though a little bit, with one, because of the economy and all the stuff that happened with people starting their own companies, but two, because it's becoming really, with technology and all these neat things happening and people making a lot of money, it's changing, but I think there's a long ways to go, especially in our area, I guess.
Sorry, just going to jump right in. Also, we know from current information that's coming out from employers and that it is absolutely essential that students have real-world experience. And so I think I couldn't encourage enough, if you have projects in classes, make them real. Assign them to clients in the community. You never know that, as a faculty member, that's kind of risky because you don't know what they're going to come up with. But boy, they learn, and they are able to see that not everything is exactly the same as it is in the book or the way you tell it or even the way this other group is working. And that's experience they can put on their resume. And also, I am astonished at the number of colleges and universities, business programs, that do not require internships. Internships are becoming so important for college business students who are not already working. And I think we're doing them a disservice by not requiring that. And I think those things help drive that shift that mentality, I think.
I'm going to follow up on Margareta's comment and your comment. That's kind of what I was referring to earlier about the business model of a proprietary higher education school where you are learning from people in the field, and the professors are bringing to the classroom real world application. So I think that's a real value of, I'm a real believer in higher education proprietary schools because of that business model. And the other thing I wanted to say is I moved to Kansas City 1 year ago from the San Francisco Bay Area. Most of my customers are from Silicon Valley. And the thinking to follow up your comment about culture, the thinking in the Bay Area is pretty much the exact opposite of what I've been experiencing since I've been back to the Midwest, which is I'm not going to go to work for someone, I'm going to go to work with someone, and I'm going to learn as much as I can, and I'll be working on building my own business on the side. So I think it's partly a cultural thing. You know, the companies that I've been exposed to in the for-profit corporate world here in Kansas City, employee engagement culture is much more I work for you versus we work together. I think it's really a cultural mindset.
I do think it's getting better though.
Oh yeah.
I'm the over 35 male members. So, but the big corporations today, I don't think are near as stodgy as they said the AT&T of 30 years ago and the IBM of 30 years ago. And the schools are doing that. Schools are teaching people to think entrepreneurial. The businesses, I mean, you can even be in the middle of the, audit department of the big company, and you can be innovative if you're in the right company and you've got the right boss that allows you to do that, and more are doing it. I mean, a lot of it is big companies, frankly, got their butt kicked so many times by the small entrepreneurs, and now I said, we've got to be able to get this innovation in our business too. And it's not there, but it's a lot better than it was 20 years ago.
And to kind of play off of Ed's comments, I see a lot of two things in the classroom, especially in classroom discussion. One, I see the notion of I'm going to graduate with my CPA, I'm going to go to a firm, I'm going to get my gold watch, I'm going to retire, I'm going to get my benefits. That's gone. And I don't know if all of you would agree with that, but there is no I work for my duration at one company. It's almost expected. You're going to jump. You're going to be at Sprint, but maybe jump to that startup that you've been spending time at. And the other thing that I really see is with your language of I'm going to work for somebody as opposed to with somebody, if they're in a managerial type atmosphere, I'm working for you. That's the end of it, because that's your mindset, regardless of your age or your culture or anything else. If that's how you approach things in the workplace, then I'm working for you, and I can't break out of that. And is it worth my time to even try and get you to break out of it and change the workplace because I'm one employee? But when you're in truly a position where you have a leader that you follow, that you want to follow, that inspires teamwork within the organization, then you shift from the I'm working for you to the I'm working with you. It's a collaborative environment. And we were actually speaking before the panel about your new workplace and a bigger workplace and fostering that interaction and getting away from the cubes and the cube farms and having the big open interactive places where you feel like you're actually working with your colleagues on a team and even your supervisors, leaders.
You've seen a lot of people leave a big company and then go to a smaller company or start a restaurant or whatever, and then they go back and go. So I mean, life's a long life. So, I mean, you can. I'm in my 30s now, 33, but I mean, 10 years from now, who knows? I might be doing something completely different. So I think it's great. I think there's a lot of consulting going on now, a lot of companies working together, and the mindset has changed for sure. Starting to.
Can I answer your question?
Thank you. Thank you, Ron.
No?
I'd like to ask the panel to kind of respond to two words. I think there are two words that separate the dreamer from the entrepreneur, and those words are motivation and perseverance.
I think that Ed, we were talking before, so we're starting out. You can dream about a lot of ideas, but if you never act on it, it's just a dream. the entrepreneur.
Does it?
And I want to be careful, but you know, to say that entrepreneurs are dreamers, but they put action into
Right, there
their
you go.
thoughts.
I think the way Ed kind of put a nice bow around this was you have to have the passion, that's the dreamer, but you have to have the perseverance, that's the person who's focused and just gets the job done. You really have to have that balance of being driven by your dream, but being disciplined and focused enough. And that kind of makes me think about your primary student population, military student. Definitely people who are resourceful have to think on their feet, have to think outside of the tank, so to speak. But at the same time, they're learning discipline and focus. So what a great market you have to appeal to for entrepreneurial programs. That specific student population, I think.
I think that one thing I run into a lot, we run into a lot, is this really bright, innovative person who just has these ideas all over the place. And they're great, they're fun to listen to and to talk to and brainstorm with, and that'll go from here to here to here. And to get them focused though. And that's where the business plan comes in, and that's where the marketing plan comes in. And that's where I say, okay, on marketing, and it helps these guys because they aren't that way. They're like this. They've got to put a plan down on paper, get an implementation plan. And here's what you're doing and when on this subject. And otherwise, you're going to be doing this and working on this one tomorrow and that one the next day, not getting anywhere. And I think they need to learn that discipline and to get focused. And once you know they get focused and that thing takes off, well then you can grow it and go with other ideas, other products, or other innovations. But if they don't focus, it's not going anywhere.
Well, there's the whole business of running the business, which is not the fun stuff. You know, the accounting, the managing employees or independent contractors, accounts receivable, accounts payable, keeping the pipeline full, marketing. That's the business of running the business to sell the product or service you want to sell. So you have to have the motivation. That takes a lot of motivation and drive to do that, but also the perseverance and the discipline to just do the down and dirty work that you have to do to keep the company going.
And nobody thinks about that stuff.
No.
You know, you have all the friends that have ideas, but once you implement the idea and actually start product. I started a company, a product company. I mean, it is unbelievable how much time is spent doing that. I mean, getting something made, produced, it's not easy. So.
And the price tag on it.
Oh, right.
Putting it into the inventory system.
And nobody likes, I mean, personally, I don't like the billing process. So, I mean, doing the accounting work is also, gosh, it takes forever.
And you made a really excellent point when you asked the question, Chad, about what's the one thing that each of us would recommend for an entrepreneur starting a small business or starting a business. Your comment was to find someone who's successful at it and learn from them. I think that is just really a brilliant comment, because if you can find someone who's already been successful at what you want to do and learn from them, you can create a more precise business plan, a more precise marketing plan, and you can create a good time management plan to focus on the activities that will drive your business, because you'll learn from that person who's successful.
And free to make your own mistakes.
Yes.
And there are so many good stories out there. The life stories of people who have started something and how they did it and the mistakes they made and how they got over it. So in terms of case studies, you have the actual documentation from all of these folks. There's the Google story and the Patagonia story and Successories and all of them. And something can be, taken from every single one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mine's more of a comment, and it's not a long comment. Entrepreneurship is something that's near and dear to my heart, because I taught my first class in it 35 years ago. I had to figure out the time, that's dating me. But to high school seniors in marketing, and this was in Nebraska, in Omaha. And they had to write a business plan during the whole senior year. In their junior year, they learned about marketing. Senior year, we went through and we wrote a business plan. They actually had to choose a location somewhere in the Omaha metropolitan area. They had to do all the work on it. And they would go out and they had to go visit companies that were operating the same type of business. And things have changed a lot in 35 years, but that's my first class. They now actually call they don't call it in any of the high schools entrepreneurship, but there's competition on a national level, as well as the state and the local level on entrepreneurship. And so they've made great inroads. There are certain states, such as Nebraska, that now actually promote entrepreneurship in the grade schools. And that is just remarkable. And so I don't think a lot of people know that. Not all states are on that program, but a couple of educators I used to teach with. I retired from an insurance company and handling lawsuits, and I have a law degree as well. I was looking for something new to do once I retired, because as we were all talking about, switching jobs. And I've always loved education. I have been teaching off and on for 35 years, and I went back and talked to some of my friends in Nebraska, and they've done this entrepreneurship program. So I go to the state of Missouri and say, why don't we have this here? And it's educators that are holding us back, but not the marketing and business people. It's like the high school principals and the superintendents that think we need to concentrate our schools on our students going to college. And I'm like, yeah, okay, tell me what degree you're going to get that you don't need some business background, and tell me one single occupation that there is out there that can't use some business background. There's not a single one. And law schools today, and they've been hiring business people to run their law firms and business people to run the medical practice because they don't have the skills. They may be really good at one particular area, but they don't have the business background. Every business class I have taught, whether it be business law, marketing, management, I'm teaching human resources right now, those are all preparations for not only being an entrepreneur, but for any career. It will help you. And so I think we're preparing people for that, but it's the overall outlook that people need to see that you need that background. Everything I've always taught is you go out and get experience in whatever you want to do. If you want to open a restaurant, don't come to me with a plan until you worked at several restaurants and gained as much experience as you can. Today, with people losing their jobs right and left, people are going out and starting businesses that aren't prepared. Some, though, are doing quite well. 10 years ago, that would not have worked to start your own business in your home on the internet and do that. But today, there's some really neat successes out there. But the real key is to do the research, and we talk about that. But I think that we are all teaching entrepreneurship in the schools. We just don't call it that. Now, if we teach that creativity, that we encourage people, and a lot of my students right now are military, they're close to retiring from the military, so they're looking for careers. These people are in their 30s, 40s. What are you passionate about? I've asked them. They don't know. I've asked high school seniors. They don't know. The only way a lot of them are going to find out is to go out and do and try different things and take different classes and learn all the different possibilities. Because what I'm passionate about today is not necessarily what I was passionate about 20 years ago. So anyway, I think there's a lot out there, but we just don't call it by name. But there are several states like Nebraska that are putting it into the grade schools. Now, Missouri, we made a big step forward. We're now putting Leaders in Me program into the grade schools. And this is off of Stephen Covey's plan where we're encouraging people to be individuals and everybody can be a leader. And so that's a step in the right direction. But that's not quite where I'd like to see us go, because I think we all need, I love business. I think I don't care what you're going to do. Even running your own family, you need some business. Some good business background will make you more successful. And teachers used to say, oh, I don't need it. They're learning now that you're having to do contract teaching, just managing your own education, your funds, and things that are going on, and writing grants. Business background really helps you. So anyway, I throw that out. I just have to I think it's neat that some elementary schools are starting there, and I think we do a lot, but it's just not recognized.
We sense a little bit of enthusiasm on this one.
Speaking our language.
Any comments from the panel before we take another question?
No, I'm just thinking, sitting here thinking that seriously, some of the best ideas come from, and what makes them unique is that mix of all of those different pieces of experience. And we all bring a different mix to the table. So, and some of the best entrepreneurs out there are moms.
We had one on a radio show, Mom Made Foods. She started organic frozen foods 10 years ago out of Kansas City. She's in DC now, but she was on Oprah, like right out of the chute. couldn't scale anything, and now she's very successful in Whole Foods stores throughout the country. So moms are very successful entrepreneurs.
I believe you had a question, and then Joe, you also had one as well, right?
Yes, we talked about finding a passion. Can you guys talk about a little bit about how to effectively manage stress and when you get discouraged to where it avoids the entrepreneur giving up their business when it's actually a good business when you're stressed out?
Have a supportive spouse.
What?
A supportive spouse.
Yes.
How to have that network of cheerleaders in place and people that will believe in you and not sit there and go, oh my God, why did you do that? Your idea would be so much better if you did X, Y, and Z. And, you know, for us, time management, to be honest, we don't sleep a lot. And that's even with effective time management, but really identifying your goals, setting milestones, and again, it goes back to that business plan, but even breaking it down on a more micro level of how you're going to manage your time, what you're going to spend your time on, and it kind of circles back around again, finding the person who's been successful already that is there to mentor you or would be available to mentor you, and finding those people who are willing to step up, even if they're not necessarily in the same industry, but just kind of as a touchstone to touch base once a month. As early as it may be, having a group of girlfriends or male friends that you can meet with once a month and say, here's my list of goals for the month. Will you help me stay accountable? And if you've got somebody watchdogging you and you're watchdogging somebody else, you don't have to, you know, be elbow deep in the minutia, but just be able to say, did you meet these goals? And have that accountability, I think, relieves a lot of stress of when am I going to get this done? You know, when am I going to find the time? Suddenly it's a priority because you've made a promise to somebody else as well as yourself.
And I used to call it planning for spontaneity, so that within my daily, weekly, and monthly plan, I actually plan fun things to do for Roben. And if I knew that those fun things were coming up, I had it to look forward to, which helped me to continue to be focused and drive.
Incentives.
Joe, you had a question?
I've been listening to the panel, and I'd like to be a little bit of a foil here, because as I listen to you all, I'm thinking in my mind, who are the most successful entrepreneurs that I've encountered in my life? And you start rattling them off. You say, Scott McNeil, you all know who he is. Sun Microsystems, Bill Gates, Jack Kent Cooke, who owned the Redskins. You know, Nolan Bushnell, who started Atari. And a book that I just finished that I would recommend to anybody is the biography of Ewing Kauffman. And in each and every one of those instances, none of those folks had formal education. So what is it? We're all educators sitting in this room, and we're talking about the importance of infusing education modules into the lives of the up-and-coming Bill Gates and Scott McNeil. But what is it that distinguished them and made it possible for them to be so successful? I'll just give you one aside. When I was in Switzerland, a fellow brought his kids from his third marriage into the airport to go to the school that I was running. His name was Sam Wiley. He started software. And I'm sitting on a bench with him. He's got a beat-up old leather jacket on, and he's just been on the cover of Business Week as the most highly paid business executive in America that week. I said, Sam, what do you attribute your success to? He said, well, I guess it's that I went bankrupt 3 times and I still didn't quit. So I like just a little, you know, the whole evening so far has been focused on the importance of education. And I agree that education is critically important today, tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow. But are there some intangibles God-given gifts that make it possible for some of these people to do what they do? I don't know the answer, but I'd be curious to hear your comments.
I think there's some great examples when you look at like Sam Walton and other founders that have done things. One of the things I think they did though is that, and some people have the ability to do this, is that they learn from their mistakes. That's something that you can't always teach somebody to do. Somebody said they're very, very smart, but they don't have any common sense. A lot of the successful entrepreneurs, they didn't quit, but the second time that they went at it, they ran at it a different way. And maybe that didn't work, but they saw one more side of the hill that they could run up. Then they ran up it that way. What I have found that higher education does is it expands, and I tell students, as I said, regardless of who you are today, when you start this process, at the end of this process, you will not be the same person. I said, you will learn. Now, the formal education system forces them into that mold. I think some entrepreneurs have the innate ability to learn from their mistakes. But just like Sam Walton, I read his biography. He was crafty in that, one of the passages that I read is that he was over at Kmart on his hands and knees tearing apart a display case to put in his own store. He's like, I like what that's doing, that's selling product. How did you do that? He was educating himself, and he had the initiative to go do it. And I think that a lot of these people, that's something that an entrepreneur, those self-starters have, is that they see something they're curious about. And I think they do have that curiosity, that drive. I need to understand how that works. So maybe they get it through a formal education, maybe they learn it through another resource that we have available, or maybe they go tear it apart and they figure out how you did it and they make it better. And I had a friend, he ran his own accounting firm and he did all these kinds of other things. He had a philosophy. He said, if it's good enough for me to look at and copy off of you, you've got a good thing. And I think that, he didn't steal the idea, but he took something and he revamped it and he made it his own touch to it. I think a lot of those entrepreneurs did that. They didn't quit. They saw multiple paths that are taking them someplace. And if it didn't work and they ran into a roadblock, they backed up and took a different run at it.
And I think of some business leaders that I know that I asked the question, what is it that's made you so successful? And there was a theme that each of them answered. One of them was Stephen Covey, another was Tom Peters, another is Al Shugart, the CEO of Seagate Technologies, and another is Jim Collins. And so when I was in my consulting business and executives I worked with, I would always ask, what makes you a successful CEO or business owner? And this was the theme that came up. And the theme was, I'm going to use the word humility, but the theme was, I need to make sure that I don't think that I'm so smart that I can't learn from somebody else. And as soon as I start thinking that I don't need to surround myself with bright and intelligent people I can learn from, that's when I'm going to fall. So what I saw in these men that I worked with and knew was really a sense of humility. In spite of how successful they were still humble enough to say, I can always learn and I can always grow. So whether they had a formal education or not, which these four men did, that's just, I think, a trait that I think can help anyone to be successful.
How would you infuse that into a curriculum?
Well, gosh. Panel? Well, I don't know. I'd have to really think about that. That's a great and excellent question. I'd have to really think about that. There's one of Jim Collins' book, I think it's the second or third book now, is about what causes companies to fail and people to fail, and he basically boiled it down to hubris. And so I guess just off the top of my head, I weave it in that way, and I quote the case studies he's shown of the organizations that have fallen. Even Steve Jobs, when he fell the first time around, it was his hubris that got in the way. So, I don't know, that's an excellent question.
I think we do it through class discussion. You know, if somebody brings a real world case example, and I'm notorious, I've had a student several times in different classes, and he will come in the first day and go, oh God, here we go, she's going to bring up case studies and ask you for real world examples, which I guess my reputation has preceded me, but that's all right. But I guess from the aspect of, we've got so many different students, we've got single parents, we've got military students, we have people who aspire to be small business owners, we have line workers, we've got that mix. You know, it's not necessarily just surrounding yourself with people who are smarter, but learning from everybody else's experiences. And if everyone is bringing something different to the table, and you make a discussion forum online that is open and respectful, then people are more likely to share those experiences. And I think that's ultimately what we all try and do as educators, is try and foster that place where it's safe to learn. It's safe to say, you know what, you might have all this experience in the medical field as a nurse, I have none. What can I learn from you that I can take back to my own job or my own position in the field in Afghanistan that would apply? What are the universal things that I can bring back? And if we can value everybody else's experiences as much as our own and recognize that there's something to take from those, then I think we're becoming more successful in integrating that concept in the classroom.
I guess when we think about what is education, why go and get a college education? I saw a lot of you read the book Outliers, which is a great book, and not to downplay anybody's accomplishment, but there's being in the right place at the right time is a lot of this too. Like Bill Gates, for instance, he said he didn't have a formal education, but he lived across the street from Washington University, and every night he'd sneak down to the computer lab. So from the time he was a junior in high school, he was playing with his computers every night. And he had a passion for that, and he had the opportunity to do it. It was one. I think Jobs and Gates and one or two of these other fellows I can't think of right now, who big in the computer revolution, were all born within 6 months of each other. So opportunities there. So a lot of the people that you talk about are successful. They've taken advantage of the opportunities that they had, and by going and getting a college education today, I think what you're doing is trying to give yourself more chances to be in the right place at the right time. You know, learn more. So there's more things that maybe you think you can be innovative in, and so that's why none of these guys could have sat in a closet and be their life experiences and a college education adds to life experiences.
And working experience too. And work experience. It's like Union Kaufman, where he worked at it, was making more money than the CEO, right, in sales, and they wanted to get rid of him. And they.
Thank you, Chase, for moderating. Thank you, panel, for coming out, and everyone for attending. I think we had a great dynamic conversation. One more round of applause. We'd love to do some networking and have some refreshments, so please join us in the back. And again, thank you for attending.